keys to the city, baby. When you see us, so you know you really viewing greatness in the making. Double up on facts we stating. Podcasting, cruise control, city, state, the nation. So what you saying, what we saying, prime information. Facts, keys to the city, we unlocking the statements.
Streaming every Friday.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are back, Keys to the City. I know it looks surprising. We do not have the Ted Keys and the Joseph Aguirre not in town today as they are off. They will be back next week. But I got a very, very special guest. My man, Nolan Rich, host of the Rich Sports Talk Radio, YouTube, and all their social medias. Tell them where you can follow Rich. Where can they follow?
Absolutely, guys. You can follow us. We stream all the time. We actually had a live stream yesterday about the Giants. I gave my Giants grade yesterday. Rich Sports Talk on YouTube. You can listen wherever. I know, on iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can check us out. And, of course, richsportstalk.com. Had my big board up there, which surprisingly in the NFL, everyone criticized me. I had one QB in the top 50. Like, everyone's like, oh, you're crazy. And of course,
now, the question is, who was it?
Well, let's see if you can guess. I think you have an idea who it is. It's Malik Willis, and I'm still amazed that Kenny Pickett got drafted over him. Look, this was not a good quarterback class. I'll be frank, but Malik Willis did two things which really stood out to me. He was the only one that had an elite trait. He had elite athleticism, but the other thing too is, I look at like a Kyler Murray and a Josh Allen where, yeah, they weren't refined throwers when they first came in, but they could survive the first 18, 20 games off that athleticism, just make plays and learn the offense. And I think it's that big of that. Willis could have made that adjustment a lot easier than Pickett. I think there's going to be a ton of pressure on Pickett because, yeah, I know.
Do you think he's going to start right off the bat? Are we thinking Trubisky is going to be the guy?
Personally, I'd go with Trubisky. I would ease Pickett in, and it's going to be tough for the Steelers. I mean, I love the Steelers roster. I love their defense, but do you look at their quarterback situation? Like, even if Deshaun Watson only plays 8 games, they don't only have the 4th quarterback in that division. They have it by a wide margin. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the Steelers this year. And look, I know it's a great story. It's great for Kenny Pickett, but Steelers fans, I know you're trying to make up for not drafting Dan Marino back in the 83, 84 draft, but that's in the past. I don't think this is going to appease the football gods that you finally took the quarterback out of Pitt, although I can't say much as a Jet fan because Dan Marino was also in that draft.
Yeah, right?
And I still remember that one fan. Like, I'll always remember that one clip they cut to the Jet fan. He's like, "Well, we were supposing if Marino was there, he would be the pick, but the Jets obviously know something we don't know." And of course, it's like, oh yeah, they don't know much of drafting. God, just play the 3-minute clip of all the bad draft picks, fullbacks.
Well, I'm glad you've been talking about quarterbacks and I'm glad you brought up the Jets. And you were talking about Malik Willis, and you were saying, and we had a lot of conversations about this with the Giants. Well, this is going to be an all New York show. The reason I have Nolan on is because, well, he's the perfect fan. Giant fan, Jet fan. Yankee fan, Met fan. Baseball we'll talk about too, because the New York Yankees and the New York Mets are kicking ass right now in baseball. We'll talk about that, but let's start off with, you're just talking about the quarterbacks. There's a lot of quarterbacks that face pressure each and every year for different reasons. Well, I hate to say it, guys, but we have 2 quarterbacks in New York right now, Nolan, that are dealing with an immense amount of pressure coming into this season. I know everybody's like, well, Zach Wilson only had his 2nd year. Well, let's think about these 2 guys right now. Daniel Jones, 6th pick. The offensive line was awful. I mean, this is a vastly improved offensive line within months now. They get some weapons. They added some weapons in the draft. They get a defensive lineman in Kayvon Thibodeau. We didn't really talk a lot about the draft recap, but the Giants and Jets hit home runs out of the park first round. They were A-plus grades for first rounders, if anybody wants to argue it. But then we talk about Zach Wilson. Why is Zach Wilson on this? He's only been in the league for 2 years, coming into a 2nd year. But look what the Jets did. The Jets, throughout this entire draft, and even free agency let's talk about the past couple years with the Jets. Elijah Vera-Tucker. Think he's going to be an absolute stud. Loved the pick last year. He's turned out to be great. Then you look at the 3 first-round picks this year. The first 4 picks, I should say. Breece Hall. You get Garrett Wilson, number 1. You get Jermaine Johnson. And then you take Sauce Gardner. So there's no excuses for either one of these quarterbacks. But Nolan, The floor is yours. Which quarterback to you coming into the 2022 season, and we'll get more into this because it is only May 6th, but which quarterback, New York quarterback, is mounting more pressure?
I mean, it is amazing what Joe Douglas has done. I mean, a great example of like, this is the roster he inherited compared to where it is now. Like the Jets 2019 roster was Sam Darnold, Le'Veon Bell, Bilal Powell, Robbie Anderson, Quincy Enunwa, Jamison Crowder, Chris Herndon, Ryan Griffin, Kelvin Beachum, Kelechi Osemele, who never played a game for the Jets, Ryan Khalil out of retirement, Brian Winters, Brandon Shelton. This is their lineup this year. Zach Wilson, Breece Hall, Michael Carter, Corey Davis, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, CJ Uzuma, Tyler Conklin. That doesn't include the tight end Jeremy Rucker, George Fant, Laken.
I love that pick.
I love Rucker.
I think that's an incredible pick. And yeah, that's another thing. Tight ends, man.
Yeah.
Tyler Conklin was a very valuable option for the Minnesota Vikings last year. And then we know what CJ Uzama did last year for the Bengals. And then you draft, they didn't even need it, but you draft a homegrown kid that's been a Jet fan all his life, Rucker from Ohio State, who's a stud too. I mean, damn, man. The Jets from where they were 2 years ago to where they are now, Nolan. I know it's the Jets. It's like the Mets thing. We're all excited, but you never know. Sometimes they fall short. But if you're a Jet fan, you got to be sitting here like, holy crap. The future is legit now.
Yeah, we went from having no pass rushers since John Abraham to all of a sudden now having too many pass rushers, thinking which ones they're going to cut. But to get to the question, I think it's Zach Wilson because, like, I think a lot of Giant fans.
You said that. I'm stunned.
Well, I feel like with Daniel Jones, like, I really truly believe this, and I think the draft kind of reflects this. It's kind of like what happened with the Jets and Sam Darnold, where Douglas came in and, you know, they said the right things. They did moves that, yeah, they can say that they're helping the quarterback, but do they truly believe in Daniel Jones? Like, I think that this coaching staff and this front office, I know the ownership probably hasn't moved off of Daniel Jones, but I think privately that they've already kind of made a decision. And I think Giant fans, for the most part, are comfortable with the fact that, yeah, Daniel Jones is probably the holdover this year. For Zach Wilson, personally, I feel bad for these young quarterbacks because we're in such a society now where if they don't pop by year two, we're like, get rid of them. And I liked a lot of the strides Zach Wilson made at the end of last season.
He did play well at the end.
Right. And you look over the last stretch, I think he went 156 passes without throwing an interception. Mm-hmm. Like, I kept pointing out, like, people are like, oh, he's not throwing a bunch of touchdowns. And I'm like, yeah, he's also throwing to his number one receiver was Braxton.
But he looked like a different quarterback. He doesn't have to throw 30 touchdowns in those last 8 games. If he looks like a completely different, a confident quarterback from where he was in week 1 before those injuries, and then he came back, that's all you want in a rookie season. Like, if you could get a guy like what Mahomes did, then that's just that doesn't happen a lot. That doesn't happen. So if you're expecting that, then good luck. You got to have high expectations, I guess. Then you must have high expectations for life in general. But you just said it. You saw improvements from the beginning of the year to where he ended. And that's all that should matter. I mean, you could be the San Francisco 49ers right now and still figuring out, is Jimmy G going to be the guy, or is it going to be Trey Lance, who has continually underwhelmed, as we've been hearing by the reports.
And that's true. And one of the big things with Zach Wilson is he, I think, has the best advantage of all these second-year quarterbacks because everyone's talked about the offseason moves the Jets have added and the pieces. And I do think that's important because, I hate this notion. And one of the things that drove me nuts as a Jet fan saying when they were in that draft for Trevor Lawrence, like Trevor Lawrence shouldn't go to the Jets. They wouldn't do anything. Look at what the Jaguars did. They should have taken a tackle at number 1 to protect their young quarterback. And instead they drafted 2 middle linebackers in the first 3 rounds and barely drafted a receiver. So, and then, I mean, just
that's why they're Jacksonville. They're starting to become like one of those franchises again.
But even the Jets, like, it's not just the piece they've had, like, Zach Wilson's the only quarterback going into this next season of that draft class that has the same OC and the same head coach they had the previous year. Even in New England with Mac Jones, they're changing offensive coordinators, and that is a huge aspect. And for Zach Wilson, that makes the adjustment easier because he doesn't have to learn a new scheme. He doesn't have to learn new verbiage. He can focus on the mechanical things that he had to work on. And there's pictures of him at training camp. It looks like he's added about 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, which
that's
is
another thing I saw.
He looks
good. He looks good. That's what you can ask for, man.
Right. And I think it's a situation too where the Jets just want clarity. Like, and I keep saying this to Jet fans because one of the comments I always get is like, do the Jets have to make the playoffs next year? Do the Jets have to win 8 or 9 games? And I keep saying, look, the AFC is insane right now. If the Jets win 7 games, but Zach Wilson looks like the guy, then it's a great year. And I keep telling Jet fans, like, I'd rather have the Jets win 7 games and have an answer at quarterback than have the Jets win 8 or 9 games. Look, the defense looks like a top 10 defense.
But your situation is like Cleveland. Your situation is like Cleveland, where you have a quarterback that it could be good, but you're just not feeling them. It's like the Giants. I mean, the Giants, they feel like there's talent with Daniel Jones. And all we've been hearing about Daniel Jones, he's got the skill set to deliver in this league. I don't know about you. I don't know if we've been watching the same thing for the past couple of years, but I know the talent could be there, but it's just not replicating on the field. And that's the biggest deal for me. And I really love this draft from the Giants standpoint. I know that people have like, well, why did they take a guy like Wan'Dale Robertson second pick? They traded back, got more picks. I get that. And then they take a guy that probably could have been there in the late rounds. They just did it because they need to build depth. This is a team that lacks depth, lacks talent. The Giants did the right thing. Joe Schoen is trying to do the right thing. You do realize, people, that Dave Gettleman was the former GM of the New York Giants who decided to take a running back at 2. We all know how it panned out. We can only hope that Barkley pans out to be that guy. But still, now we're still in a situation where we might have to cut one of our best players in James Bradbury because of the cap space. We are in cap hell, and Joe Schoen has done a tremendous job in trying to get to some point where we could say, hey, we could pay our draft. We could sign our draft picks because, we have to do that too. And the Giants are struggling right now to figure that out. But thank you, Dave Gettleman.
Well, here's a great question. Who screwed up their franchise more, Mike Maccagnan with the Jets or Dave Gettleman? Because Mike Maccagnan.
This will be biased. Giant. It's Dave Gettleman. To be in cap hell for a new GM who is well respected around the league and is a guy that I believe is going to deliver as the next great GM for the New York Football Giants. Because I know people are like, well, we don't know what he's going to do. He's going to be crap. I've seen people bash him because of his selections in the day 2, day 3. They're like, why are they taking these guys? Well, this guy came from Buffalo with Brandon Beane. If anybody remembers, and you do because you're an AFC East guy, right? The Bills were bad in 2017. They were like the Giants. They had to figure out what the direction of this team was going to be. I don't know if we've seen 5 years later, the Buffalo Bills, to some, maybe the best team in the NFL. And that's good GM. That's good scouting. The Giants are doing the right thing. They're getting rid of all the old bad layers. Got rid of Chris Pettit. Thank God. So they're starting brand new. This is a complete new regime, and I'm very thankful that we finally got some competency. I said it last week, Nolan. I said it. Finally, it feels like we can have some competency, but the most important thing is the quarterback. And it sucks because in a day and age of football now that, like you said, I'll quote you, you need to have a quarterback that can deliver, like not year one, but year 2, you have to take that next leap. We've already seen it. I mean, you just said it, the AFC. Good luck to whoever comes out of that conference because you can't sit here and say that team's coming out of there because you're going to be like, but wait, Cincinnati that did this, Buffalo, the Dolphins added, the Chiefs, the Broncos, all these teams, the whole AFC North, the whole AFC West, it's wide open. And then I looked at the Giants' schedule. It's a very favorable schedule from the standpoint of quarterbacks. They don't play a lot of great quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers is probably the biggest name, and they'll be playing in London that game. But to me, I know it probably is biased. It's Daniel Jones, man, because I just haven't seen any situation where he's had to make strides. I feel like his best season was his rookie season, Nolan. And I don't know about you, but you could tell me if you see something different or I'm just crazy, but I don't see anything to tell me that. And I also want to say, I do not want to see Daniel Jones fail because if Daniel Jones succeeds, we got our franchise quarterback and the Giants are going to be in competition for quite some time. So that's a good thing, but I don't see it right now.
To be fair, like I actually highly value Dan Jones. I always remember I did a podcast in that October. You're saying he was going to be a first round pick, and people thought it was crazy. And then he ended up being the 6th overall pick in the draft. But Daniel Jones, he has the talent to play quarterback. The 2 biggest things I've seen with him that cause for concern. Number one's on the field, and number two is one of the biggest problems is his injury history. I mean, he cannot stay healthy. He needs to prove his durability.
Yep.
But he needs to really, and this is something you can't really teach, is the pocket awareness. Like we see the great quarterbacks, like they understand, they have that timer in their head. They understand when to move up in the pocket, when to get out of the pocket. And that's really what his fumbling problem is. It's not that he can't hold on to the football. It's he's just not great at sensing that rush, sensing that pocket closing, sensing that he needs to step up, step out, get out of harm's way.
And he's coming, and that's the thing, coming into year 5.
Yeah.
This is stuff that's easy stuff that you got to be figuring out. And you're in year 5, and you mean to tell me that this guy still, you believe, is a franchise quarterback 5 years?
But the Giants haven't done him any favors. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, what offense is this? Is this his 4th offense that he's learning? I mean, that was the thing with Sam Darnold.
He was under Shermer. He was under Judge. And this
will be the 3rd. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're asking someone now in his 4th season to learn his 3rd offense. And this is an offense that does placate to a skill set, which is good. You got the coach that has an athletic quarterback. And one of the reasons the Robinson pick I think is underrated is
so you like the pick.
Well, it fits with their ideology. So one of the great examples, like, because you mentioned the Bills, how they built it. Now, the Bills built it a little bit differently. They did a lot of free agent moves to rebuild their offensive line. And it's ironic because this guy was just cut. But one of the biggest moves that no one ever talked about that was a huge impact, and especially for Josh Allen's development, was the signing of Cole Beasley from Dallas. Because
he's a slot receiver. Yep.
Well, he became that security blanket for Josh Allen because Knox was still a developing tight end. He really wasn't that go-to guy. So the Giants and the Bills, what I think they're going to take from the Bills is utilizing that slot receiver position as the check down option. So I do think that that's one of the reasons they highly valued that slot receiver position. And I was a little surprised they didn't actually bring in Cole Beasley or try to bring him in on the minimum.
Is he, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. Is he has he signed with anybody, or is he still a free agent?
Last I checked, he's still a free agent. He's cut. I know he's over 30 years old now, but like he's someone that
you said he's dependable.
Oh yeah, he's like he's one of those guys. Like he's just an underrated. I'm surprised almost Bill Belichick hasn't brought him in for God's sake.
Yeah, right.
I mean the Patriots. The Patriots can't draft, but they'll sign like guys that are past their prime or just don't fit anymore, and then all of a sudden they become Pro Bowlers again. But in regards to Daniel Jones, like. I almost feel like there's a little bit less pressure because with Zach, I think that there's this mounting pressure because of the arms race in the AFC, because in the NFC, if I asked you who are the top 5 quarterbacks, it's a debate. You get to the first 2 or 3, and then you get like, I'm not sure 4 and 5.
Your 3 quarterbacks probably in the NFC is
top
Brady,
5, yeah.
Brady,
Rodgers.
Brady, Rodgers, Stafford.
Yeah, maybe, and then who's 4 and 5?
Kyler?
Yeah, and then you're like, but then the
maybe
AFC
Jalen or something. I don't even know. Dak, I guess.
Yeah, then the AFC. Okay, who are the top 5? Is it Burrow? Is it Jackson? Is it Mahomes? Is it Herbert? Yeah. Like it's like you rattled. There's like 10 or 12 people you could put in that conversation. So I think the Jets are in a position where they have to see if Zach Wilson can be a guy, and like even if he's a game manager this year, I think the Jets can prove that they can be a good team. But there's a lot of pressure riding on Zach Wilson, especially when.
Let me ask you this: as a Jet fan, would you say would he have as much pressure if he was in the NFC over the AFC, or is it because of the AFC and how deep it is as quarterbacks, just quarterbacks strictly, how deep it is, and he's probably realistically ranked more towards the bottom of the AFC quarterback rankings. If he was in the NFC, would he face as much pressure as he is coming into this season because it's in the AFC?
I think the pressure is because the AFC, because it's been such an arms race. Like, just think of all the quarterbacks that you have to go through. And, like, I think the best example is the Patriots, where you have Bill Belichick, who's arguably the greatest coach of all time. And what happened to him the last 2 meetings with Buffalo? Josh Allen and that offense, they didn't punt the football.
You
need a quarterback. And that's one of the criticisms I have of the Mac Jones pick is, I think the Patriots can win 9 or 10 games, be a wild card team every year with Mac Jones. Right. But when they have to go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, I mean, Herbert wasn't even in the playoffs last year.
Josh Allen twice.
I mean, Carr,
Russell Wilson.
And even like Yeah, Russell Wilson and even Matt Ryan's now with the Colts. I mean, it's just insane. Like, you look at it realistically, like the young kids in the AFC are Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Mills, and Zach Wilson. And for those teams, like the Jets, I think have positioned themselves like if Zach Wilson isn't the answer after next year, that they are a more attractive place for maybe a veteran quarterback that wants to come to them, or if they want to go into the draft. But there's pressure. Like, you not only need to see Zach Wilson play, but play well. Like, the Giants, I think, are fortunate in the situation where, like, I look at the NFC East, for example, like the AFC East, like, Josh Allen's going to be a great quarterback for the next decade. Yeah. Where Dak Prescott is a good quarterback, but I don't think you really worry about him, especially now with Dallas losing all those pieces. Carson Wentz is a real wild card. You don't even know with his health or just getting along with organizations.
I think you can say the same thing about Hurts too. I think with all those, with the additions of the Eagles, who are also big winners on draft night, that's another team. That's another team we got to watch out for in this year. But I think that's another thing. I feel like with Daniel Jones, the pressure I think is a bigger deal for him because you look at the NFC East, and you got Dallas, who lost a lot of key pieces to that offense, defense. They've taken a step back. The Eagles have taken a huge step forward, getting A.J. Brown, a true number one receiver, helping Jalen Hurts and seeing, hey, if you're going to be our guy, we're going to try to help you out, just like the Jets are doing, and just like the Giants are doing it, but different ways. Then you got Washington, too, who we all thought last year was going to be the team that could make a deep run in the playoffs. And, hell, they didn't even make the playoffs. Had injuries. They couldn't figure out the quarterback situation. And you said it best, the wild card, Carson Wentz. Are we going to get great Carson Wentz? I know his stats were solid, but the last image we have of Carson Wentz is getting embarrassed by those Jacksonville Jaguars. And that's why I say Daniel Jones, I think, faces more pressure, man, because of the fact that the NFC East is more wide open, where I think me and you can both agree, and I know you don't want to, but the Buffalo Bills seem like they're not going anywhere for a while. And they're going to be running that AFC East for, it seems like as long as Josh Allen is there, the Buffalo Bills will be running the AFC East.
Well, they'll definitely be a great team. But the question now, too, is they're getting into that phase where all of a sudden that cap hit is going to start taking over for Josh Allen when he gets off that rookie contract. And now you've seen it. Part of the problem with the NFL is when you start having success, the Giants are a great example. They took his great offensive coordinator. They took a big part of that front office. Let's see how the Bills do with their draft. Let's see how they do with their quarterback. Like, will there be not a lot, but even a little regression now that Brian Daboll isn't there for, one of the things about the Kansas City, I know Eric Bieniemy should be getting a head coaching job, but he's been there now for years, and that's been stable for Patrick Mahomes. But I think a part of the reason, too, is I think Jet fans, like, they've been looking so long, basically since Joe Namath, their franchise quarterback. At least the Giants have had that with Eli Manning. The Jets.
We got lucky.
Right. I feel there's so much hope put on Zach Wilson. Like, you can agree or disagree. I feel like there's a good portion of Giant fans in the fandom that have already moved on from Daniel Jones. So I don't think there's as much pressure on him, because I do think there's a good portion of the fan base that's almost like good riddance. And I do wonder, are there fans, because they have the 2 third-round picks? No, with Daniel Jones, like, is there any Giant fans? Like, one of the things I put in my draft analysis for the Giants, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this, but with both third-round picks, they had 2 third-round picks. I would have taken a shot on Malik Willis or one of these quarterbacks.
No, you know who I would have really liked? And I think he's going to do a good job. I hope he does a really good job.
Ritter.
I think Desmond Ritter. I know he went to Atlanta, and I think it's a tough spot right now. But I think with Mariota being there, give him a year. I really like Ritter, and I think the Giants, that could have been a spot for him because he's tall, lengthy. He's got the ability to expand plays, extend plays with his legs. He's accurate. I know he struggled against Bama, but he still has the look to be, I think, a solid quarterback in this league. Time will tell on that, because there's a reason why all these quarterbacks, other than Kenny Pickett, dropped into the 3rd round. It just wasn't a great class. Maybe we didn't expect it to be, but damn, 3rd round.
But that's part of my point, though, is like one of the arguments I keep hearing is like, oh, we'll get a quarterback next year. Next year's quarterback class is so much better. And like, let's be honest, there's 2 great quarterbacks in next year's class. There's probably going to be, by the time we get to it, 3. But how many teams are already jockeying for position? The Eagles are already jockeying for position for next year. I think you're going to have like 6 or 7 teams. They're going to want one of these quarterbacks.
Like the Dolphins, who got multiple draft picks. Yeah. You're right.
Next year they gave up the 4th and the 6th for Tyreek Hill. This year was the first round pick they gave up. But you're going to have a lot of teams trying to jockey up. So my argument was the opposite. Like, I understand the Giants are probably looking at next year's draft, but if you win 6 or 7 games, you might not be in position to get one of those quarterbacks. So is it worth it to just take a flyer on a 3rd round pick this year? If it doesn't work out, it's not going to kill your franchise. You're in a rebuilding year anyways.
Well, I think also that's why they did the Tyrod Taylor move, just to have that veteran
Right.
presence like him, who, if Daniel does struggle this season, you have some sort of viable option, backup option where you could put him in. He's played the game. He's a starter in this league. I mean, it sucks because as a team, for both of us, you just hate to be in this position. You just much rather be a team that's like, hey, at least I know our team still maybe is struggling, but at least we have our guy that, guess what? We can build around and we can move forward for the next 10 to 12 years. The Giants and Jets, realistically, right now at the current state, it's a toss-up. And
can we have competitive football past Columbus Day for once and not be doing mock drafts by Halloween? Like, that would be ideal for once.
When do you start? Do you start doing like mock drafts? Like, are you like that? Like, well, like Mel Kiper and McShay, where you go like start doing it? Do you start doing your mock draft for next year?
Not next year. Like, look, that's one of my favorite things is I already see mock drafts for next year. Like, look, like I really love the kid from Alabama. I love the 2 quarterbacks, but we gotta wait. Like, let's watch at least some college football next year. Let's see who plays well. Let's see who gets injured. I mean, there's so much like projection, but once we get to the end of the season, I dive full in. Like, I do full 7-round mock drafts. Like, I've done them for the Giants. I've done them for the Jets. And,
let me ask you this question. Last question, then we'll get over to this. Do you think the Jets have full-on trust in Zach Wilson?
I think they do. I think with Wilson, they really do believe in him. They believe in him a lot more than they do Mekhi Becton. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, but, what the hell's going on with that? I mean, come on. Like, this guy in his rookie year, we all thought this guy was going to be an all-pro. I mean, and all of a sudden, now we're talking about him maybe not even playing again in the New York Jets uniform. What's going on?
It's a really weird situation with Mekhi. First of all, like, we have to remember that first draft was also like the COVID draft, and it was for Adam Gase, which was basically you're getting different groceries for a very different chef. It's like you're trying to get like a 5-star chef, and this one, like, Adam Gase is serving fast food basically. But regardless, the big issue with Mekhi has been the injury issues. Like, even in that dominant rookie year, he still played less snaps than Sam Darnold, who missed 5 games that year. And also, he gave up 7 sacks in 12 games. So even though he was a dominant run blocker, there were questions about his pass blocking ability. He missed the entire season last year.
Were you a little frustrated they didn't go offensive line with the 4th pick?
No, well, that was one of the big things. Like, in my last mock draft, I actually had him going with Icky because the Jets followed what I believed, which was, look, this draft is going to be determined by how you help Zach Wilson. Like, what's going to keep your job, if you're Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, is Zach Wilson has to be a success. And look, a pass rusher is great, but also George Fant, who was a good left tackle, he's going to be a free agent at the end of next year. I know they've talked an extension already, but you need to shore up the offensive line. And I will give them credit. They ended up getting from Louisiana Lafayette the tackle Max Mitchell, who's a prospect who he had the highest PFF pass block grade in FBS. I really like his versatility. Probably going to be a swing tackle. Could probably even develop into a future starting tackle for this season, but that was one of the big things. Like, they're really believing Mekhi. I think he's going to play right tackle, but Rich Cimini had a great story where he's had issues with his weight. I mean, not once,
400 pounds. 400 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit alarming, and I understood a little bit of the benefit out this year, but the thing that always kind of bothered me with Becton, and I really loved him, and I actually got on him for missing the voluntary workouts, and people did point out that his wife is pregnant. But I said, like, look, I understand she's pregnant, and I understand all that. But if I was Mekhi, you know that there's this narrative against you. I would have just flown in, come for the first day, and then leave, and then tell reporters, look, I just want to check in, see how everything's going with my team, but I really need to get back to my family. I think that would have smoothed everything over. But when you have your head coach, basically, Robert Saleh, I've never heard a call out a player, and Mekhi's the only player he called out. And Look, I feel bad for Mekhi. He's got all the talent in the world. Like, I know the injury last year was unfortunate, but you look at the situation with the Jets right now. Yes, Zach Wilson, we know how important he is to the franchise, but the most important piece after him this year is probably going to be Mekhi Becton, because if he misses significant time again, all of a sudden that tackle position, they lucked into Morgan Moses last year. I still think I would not be shocked if they try to get a swing tackle or someone gets cut, like a veteran tackle that the Jets are going to pounce. I mean, there's still a couple of ones out there. I know Jason Peters is 40, but I do think there's maybe a tackle. I did really like they signed the kid. What was his name? From the Eagles yesterday, the guard who was like 25 years old. He started a couple games last year for them. Actually, he was the undrafted kid. I'll have to look it up, but I really like that sign. They have good depth on the interior.
And that's the most important thing about both these teams. As long as you could build depth, these are two teams that have been at the bottom of the league, literally, standings-wise, for the past 5 years. Got to build depth, and you got to do it the right way. I feel like both the New York Giants and the Jets are doing the right thing now.
Well, I've also put a little bit of a tinfoil hat on with a conspiracy theory that I have with the Jets too. Is one of the moves
not conspiracy theories.
Well, one of the moves they made was they moved Elijah Vera Tucker to right guard this year, and the reasoning they said was Laken Tomlinson was a left guard in San Francisco, and I get that. But I believe what they're probably going to do is, because they have really good depth at guard, and Vera Tucker played tackle in college, I have a feeling that Vera Tucker could kick out to tackle if Beckner, one of the tackles, goes down. So I think that that's one of the reasons they're also moving into right guard. So
you might be onto something with that.
I mean, a little bit.
Hey, if you are, you better go get a lotto ticket, and you better get it if you're right about it. But that's how I want to see it with these two guys, these two young guys. Daniel Jones got his option declined, smart by the New York Giants. We'll see what happens. There's no excuses for either one of these guys, but definitely, if I'm a Giant fan, definitely no excuse for Daniel Jones. Zach Wilson, we'll see. If he takes a step back, then Jet fans should be worried. But like you said, Nolan, if they finish 7 or 8 wins, but he looks good, I know that the AFC is going to be tough. That's all you want to see. If you see progress, Jet fans should be happy. We'll see what happens. Big winners on draft night and overall the draft, the New York Giants and the New York Jets. Doesn't happen a lot. We don't hear that recently, but we'll take it. Speaking of recently, when's the last time the New York Yankees and the New York Mets were dominating the headlines in baseball? I mean, we just talked about two teams that have been at the bottom of their league in the Giants and the Jets, and now we're talking about two teams that are at the top of both their – I mean, the Brewers. I won't forget about Brewers. If we're watching, we got Brewers fans out there. The Milwaukee Brewers are tied with the New York Mets overall for number 1 in the NL, but the Yankees are the number 1 seed currently in the AL. You're a Met fan. I'm curious to know, especially after last night's 7-run 9th inning, where the New York Mets are usually the ones giving. What's going on here? Why are the Mets, the Jets, doing the right things now? This is what's going on here. Is this a conspiracy, Nolan? What's going on?
Well, the Mets, it's 2 words that come to mind. It's Steve Cohen. I mean, that has really just changed the franchise in so immense ways, because for the first time you have an owner with the Mets, Steve Cohen, and I know the money is the first thing people mention, but you have an actual Met fan that cares about this franchise. And people always ask me, well, why do the Met fans hate the Wilpon so much? Like, why were they booing the mention of the Wilpon name when they mentioned, even at the statue dedication, that, I want to thank the Wilpons for their donation, and all you heard was Met fans booing in the background? But
it's like hearing James Dolan's name. Just booing instantly.
Yeah, just don't say it 3 times or it'll magically appear. That's like the big thing.
I was at 2. I was almost there.
But with Cohen, you have someone that cares about the Mets as a Met fan. Like, I always will go back to the Mets. Like, you look at the Wilpons, like, they were like, Fred Wilpon was a Dodger fan. Like, people don't understand. Like, I love Citi Field. Citi Field is beautiful, but it's built after the Dodgers. The rotunda is named after Jackie Robinson. And look, I understand the impact he's had on baseball, but when they first opened that stadium, it was almost like they were ashamed to call it the Mets Stadium, despite having 50 years of history and 2 World Series titles. But going back to this year, I think it was also Billy Epler. There was a lot of criticism of him becoming the general manager, but the moves he made this offseason were great. Like, not only did they go out and get good players, but they've gotten guys that have hit the ground running and have played well in the New York market. I mean, Mark Hanna has been a great addition. Sterling Marte has played like an all-star. But really, the biggest thing
I
is
always liked Marte. I always thought he was a solid pro since coming up into the league.
And he does everything. He runs.
Yeah.
He plays good defense. Like he is.
Can hit for
like
power.
We throw the 5-tool around, I think, too much in baseball, but he really is a 5-tool player. And also, Buck Showalter has been a great.
I think that
manager,
really has to be a hell of a move by by Steve Cohen. That's
right.
That's a move that not a lot of managers or owners would make, GMs would make, just because it's Buck Showalter. He's a guy that kind of like Tony La Russa, more older philosophy type manager from the 90s, was in the 2000s. He's been around the game forever, but sometimes those don't work. I think that was a great hire. And me personally, I would have loved to see Buck back with the Yankees. Personally, I'm not the biggest Boone fan. I'm really not the biggest Aaron Boone fan, but they're playing well. But that was a huge, not a lot of people talk about that signing. I know the additions for the lineup, the pitching staff. I know you lose Syndergaard, but signing Buck Showalter, getting a manager, a competent manager, is a big deal in baseball. And he's old school, and I think that philosophy could work and go a long way for the Mets. Also, you brought up with Cohen. I don't know if people know, but New York likes to spend a lot of money. And I think that's I know people hate it and people bash the New York Yankees for so long because they always had money. Well, if you have money, what are you supposed to do with it?
Well, it's not even about.
Aren't you supposed to go spend it?
Right. And the biggest. Well, I think you can agree to this too, especially being a Yankee fan. The benefit of having the money isn't necessarily making the moves. It's not having the fear to make moves because let's be honest, like under the old Mets, like whenever they had like a bad contract, like a Jason Bay or something, like that would paralyze the team from making a big move. But you saw it this week. They DFA'd Robinson Cano and basically going to eat $39 million. And if this was the old Mets, they would have let go of a valuable piece or let someone hit the trade market, like a Dom Smith or even a Janikowski, who's been a really good glue role player for the team this year. But Cano, they basically said, like, look, we don't care about the money. We care about the winning. And I do think that helps with it. Like you look at the Mets, the Yankees, when they signed was it Jacoby Ellsbury, like the Red Sox, the center fielder?
That's still to this day one of the worst Yankee contracts of all time, by the way.
But it didn't paralyze the team from still going out and making moves, and I think that's where the Mets are now. And the other big thing too, which people are forgetting, is the Mets are without arguably their best player in Jacob deGrom. Like if the Mets can get deGrom back and even just healthy for the postseason,
I think personally, that's what the game plan should be. Screw the regular season. If you're a team that's trying to compete for a championship, screw it. If you can win without your big time guy, your horse, your ace, you get him back for the postseason. Oh man, that's going to be. I know how great the Dodgers lineup is, and everybody's just saying let's just crown them now. But
they're pitching.
If Jacob deGrom comes back like late, July, maybe August, start getting the blood going. That's a team that the Mets are a very, very, I know it's early in baseball and there's 162 games and we're all going nuts. We get that. But still, if you could get Jacob deGrom, who to some is the best pitcher in baseball, just wait. I wouldn't even rush him back. You're worried about postseason. You don't care about the regular season. You have a good enough team, even without Jacob deGrom, who can still win. And it proved last night they're winning ways that in the past, a year or two ago, they were doing that. So to see the New York Mets doing what they did last night, seeing what the New York Yankees have done in the past 11 games up until when they lost to Toronto 2-1, it just feels different for both teams. You feel like the Yankees finally have some spunk to them, a little bounce to them. They feel like they're having fun. They're at the Ranger game last night, chugging beers. And then the Mets are winning how usually the Mets are losing. Right. So to see these two teams playing the way they are, and I know I emphasize it again, we're only in May, and we're going to be playing until November. But right now, these two teams are hot, and these two teams are the two best teams in baseball. And that's saying something as a New York fan because the New York Yankees started out 5-5, and now we're 18-7. So this team is finding its groove. The Mets are starting to find their identity. This could be a special year for New York fans. Maybe we do see a rematch. I can get my hopes up. Maybe we do see a Subway Series rematch. That's all I got to say about it. Both of these teams have been dominating, man. It's very impressive to see, and especially the Mets, to not have your best player and to continually pitch well, hit well, clutch hits too, especially last night, and just win, you got to be sitting back and just saying, hey, I ain't complaining.
Yeah, and I don't think even Scherzer's pitched his bets either. Like, he's pitched really well, but I don't think he's really hit his stride yet. But I would even go the step, even without DeGrom, I would still say the Mets have the deepest 1 through 5 in baseball right now. Because you look at Tyler McGill, the way he's come out of the gate in his second year. I mean, he's been unbelievable. He had a streak of 15 innings without allowing a hit. Then you have Bassett behind him. You have Cookie Carrasco, who's regained his all-star form. I mean, and then their fifth spot right now is, I know he got lit up last night, but you have David Pearson and Taijuan Walker. I mean, how many teams would they be the number 3 starter, or some teams even the number 2 starter? So the depth that they have at the rotation, the depth they have in their lineup is something. Now, am I concerned about the depth compared to the the Dodgers lineup for how loaded that lineup is? Absolutely. But if you were to ask me today,
it's ridiculous.
Right. But if you're asking me today, like, what's the Mets' biggest piece? I think they just need another arm or two in the bullpen, which at the deadline I think is more achievable than trying to go out and get another star pitcher or a star player where you have to probably pay more of a premium. And the only thing I would be concerned with the Yankees is I do love their depth of their rotation right now in their bullpen, but the biggest problem for the Yankees, I think, is who are you giving the ball to in confidence in game 1? Because Garrett Cole has struggled this year. Like, is there a way they can get another?
He's starting to play better. Those last 2 outings, he's pitched better. But that's another thing that we just talked about DeGrom and the Mets. The New York Yankees have the best record in baseball. Without Garrett Cole pitching like the ace that we thought we signed him for, but he's starting to get back into it. It seems like he's starting to get his confidence back. But that's both 2 of the best pitchers in baseball being out or not performing to their level and still winning and still leading atop the standings. That's got to say something to how the depth and to the way these teams are just playing and how they're starting to come into their zone, starting to grab an identity. And I think that's always the most important thing in sports. You have to have some sort of identity. Doesn't matter what sport it is, hockey, basketball, baseball, soccer. You got to have an identity. I think these teams are starting to get their identity back, and that's a huge deal.
Well, I have some good, exciting Jets news. They just cut.
Is that what you're smiling about over there?
Yeah. Well, I found out. Well, they signed Nate Herbig. He was the guard they signed from the Eagles yesterday, and because of that, they released Greg Van Roten to save $3.5 million in cap space. Or as I called him all last season, Greg Van Roten, because he was freaking terrible. I mean, their offensive line, he was by far like the worst guard, like in, I would say, football last year. Like, there are times like people are like, oh, like Connor McGovern looks bad at center.
I don't know about that, man. I'm pretty sure the Giants. I think the Giants would have want to say in that conversation. Other than Andrew Thomas.
But all you need to know is they traded for Laurent Duvernay-Tardif from the Chiefs. He hadn't played football in a year and a half because he was helping people as a doctor for COVID. Hadn't played football in a year and a half. He comes in. The Jets are averaging 3.3 yards per carry on the ground. They put him in over Greg Van Roten, that offensive line, 5.1 yards per carry. That just shows you how bad he was as the guard position. So,
well, hey, look at that. The happiness continues.
I know. I was like, why are we keeping this $3.5 million on the books? Like, seriously, like we still need some depth pieces. And I'm just like, really, like, he's still a guard. Like, we have Feeney, the greatest backup mullet in football. We got Herbig. Yeah, like, no, I killed him last year because I always do a recap after every Jet game. I killed it because I really care about the offense and defensive lines. Like,
well, if you were, I would have loved to see what your reactions would have been if you were a Giant fan last year.
Oh God,
like the last 8
I probably would have had like a hemorrhage or a stroke, or probably like half my face would be like frozen trying to do a recap.
Dude, I'll tell you, I'll give you one better. I stopped watching them. Never done it in my life.
It's hard.
Nolan, never done it in my life. All my life of watching New York Giant football or watching sports. I've never walked or just not watched. And I'm talking about the last month. And you know how bad the New York Giants were last month. I just stopped watching it. But
they do have 2 benchmark pieces, though. I really do believe. Like, Neal, I don't think is going to be like a perennial Pro Bowler, but he's going to be a solid starter for 10 to 12 years at tackle or guard.
I'll take it.
You're right. The question I had, the real big thing for the Giants is going to be, because they got the 2 guards from North Carolina, if one of them is even just a starter, not even a great starter, just a starter, and then you can find one missing piece next year. I think
the kid,
offensive line.
Doozy, the first North Carolina guy, He's got some. He can play guard. He can play tackle. So that's a big deal. And I like that. And that's one of the big things that Joe Schoen mentioned is versatility. A lot of these guys that they drafted can play in multiple positions. That's nothing wrong.
Who's the center? Well, who's the center or guard they got from the Bills? Because I actually
Feliciano.
Yeah, Feliciano. Yeah, he was talking on Sirius XM the other day, like because they were asking him, is he going to play guard? But it sounds like he's going to be their center this year. Because I knew like they brought in at least one piece from Buffalo, and I think they also signed like the Colts.
Yeah, Gladkowski. Cheap deal. I mean, anytime you could get a guy like that, I don't care. I'm taking as a New York Giant fan. I don't care. I just need some sort of positivity on the offensive line. But let me ask you the final question. And then we'll get out of here and let you enjoy the rest of your day. Who runs the Big Apple in baseball right now? And be honest.
Look, I think it's the Mets. Like, I just think that there's a different.
I thought you were going to give in to say the Yankees.
There's just a different energy when the Mets are good. Like, I'm sorry. Like the Yankees, like the thing with the Yankees is like they're always like.
Is it because we're used to it? I guess.
Yeah, I think that it's almost like a little bit of malaise. And like I love pointing this out to Yankee fans too. Like people are like, oh, the Mets haven't been good. And I'm like, yeah, the Mets haven't been good, but they've been to the World Series more recently than the Yankees, which is just telling. Like the Mets have been poorly run for the last decade. And now I feel like they actually have competent people. So look, I think that the Mets are in a really good position and they have a good young core of people still coming up. And one of the most underrated things I love about the Mets is they develop pitchers. I don't know what it is, but they always seem to develop young pitchers. Like Tyler McGill was never like a top 10 prospect in the organization. He was never a top 100 prospect, but all of a sudden he's coming out this year and he's looking like one of the best young pitchers in baseball. Yeah, and they changed his mechanics. I mean, they simplified his release, and all of a sudden he goes from being 94, 95 to 99 consistently. You're like, where the heck did this come from?
Yeah, right. That's a huge difference if people don't know. That's a big deal.
But I will say, like look, either way, I know this is kind of a cop-out answer. Like, look, New York fandom just deserves like teams to be good. Like the last decade
say it more. Say it one more time. Say it louder. Seriously.
Let's be honest. The last 10 years in New York sports, the 2010s was by far the worst decade in New York sports history. Like I know
I don't know about soccer, but the last team to win a championship in New York. The New York Football Giants, and that was in 2011.
Yeah, that was 2011. I mean, the Knicks, like, forget about the Knicks. I mean, the Nets. I don't even consider the Nets a New York team.
we don't talk about the
Nets. Or the Nets. I mean, the Rangers. Like the scary thing is, like the hockey teams have been the most consistent.
Let's go Blue Shirts.
Yeah.
Are you an Islanders fan? Or are you all New York? Like, what is your like in general?
Well, if they ever come back, I mean, the Hartford Whalers.
You love your Hartford Whalers.
Oh God, like I still have the jerseys. I still have the apparel. Like, look, like I mean, even this, like, because I interviewed the Whaler designer, I still have this in my office. The original designs of the Hartford Whaler logo by Peter.
Oh
Goods.
Wow, that's even cool.
That shows you how much of a freaking hockey nerd I am. But no, I love the Rangers. Like I've worked with the Bridgeport Islanders, and I actually saw Igor coming up with the Wolfpack. So he's been always someone I've kept an eye on. But no, I think the Rangers have a good shot. I don't think they have the firepower to probably win the cup. I do think they have the chance to make a deep run. I think they're going to beat the Penguins. It's going to be a long series, though. But I love what the Islanders are doing. I love that they finally have an arena, for God's sakes. I mean, God, that's been a journey.
You literally said it best. It's just as a New York fan, both of us being New York, big-time New York sports fans, the past 10 years have been miserable for all sports, not just the Giants, not the Jets, not the Yankees, not the Mets. Yeah, I know the Yankees have been winning, but you even said it, and I don't say anything because it's true. Last team in New York as a baseball team to be in some sort of championship series was the New York Mets, and that was 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy how long ago that was, and it feels even longer now. But man, it's just crazy. And like I think the football teams are going in the right direction, but it's probably going to be another year or two realistically. So it's great to just have baseball to talk about, especially in a baseball town. And look, I think hockey unfortunately doesn't get talked about in New York. I know it doesn't move the needle, and the only other sport is basketball. And like, let's be honest, the Knicks are always a disaster. I mean, watch them now trade for Zion, and then Zion doesn't play for an entire year.
And becomes, I would hate to say it, becomes Greg Oden 2.0.
Well, yeah, does he graduate from eating the beignets to then the New York like slices? I mean, that's the one thing I worry about. Like he's going from like one of the best cuisine capitals in the U.S. to another great cuisine capital in the U.S. It's that's what I get concerned about. But no, but if I'm a Yankee fan too, I'm being excited. Just don't throw bottles on the field after winning a game. I mean, like it's. I mean, it also. I love John.
That's not fans right there. That's.
I also love John Sterling. Like he needs to like. He's having trouble with the outs this year. Although I can't.
He's had multiple home run calls that were called.
I know. I cannot criticize him though, because he gave me one of the greatest YouTube videos of the year. Like I don't know if you followed Damon Amendarlo on CBS Sports Radio, but Mraz, his producer, does this fat journal, and they had Sterling narrate the fat journal. Please YouTube it later. It's one of the greatest things.
That's fine.
Just him going down a bachelor party in Vegas, like what this man ate, like and drank over St. Patrick's Day weekend. Watching Sterling crack, not just like the amount of ungodly, unhealthy food this man ate. Like Sterling just ripping off like amounts get hazy.
John Sterling definitely needs to call it quits. I think he's we need to get a new person on the radio for the New York Yankees. But
it's good. It's gonna be interesting. So anytime, man. So
I really do. But we are streaming on all social media platforms at Keys of the City. So comment, like, subscribe, share, or follow, or check out clovercrestmedia.com, where many more podcasts like Keys of the City and more. And you can check out our new. He's going to be on more. We're going to be talking a lot of football. Going to be talking a lot of baseball, especially if the New York Mets continue to stay hot. But that was Nolan Rich of Rich Sports Talk. You can check him out on YouTube and other social media networks. So, Nolan, like I said, thanks for joining me, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate it. Always love being on. Love giving my 2 cents, or I guess my 2 keys to the show today. So
I love it. But yes, we'll definitely have you on again. I greatly appreciate it, man. But we are signing off. We will be back next week to talk NBA playoffs, more New York Yankee sports, and the Mets. Well, I guess we got to talk about the Mets too. We have to, because they're just continuing to play well. And we're going to start talking more about the NFL and the word pressure, because boy, oh boy, there is a lot of quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, that are facing a great deal of pressure this year. So, ladies and gentlemen, to all the mothers out there, happy Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the beautiful women out there that have helped us, to my mother, Nolan, to you as well, your mother. I hope you all have a wonderful Mother's Day.
Yep, she will be pampered. She had to put up with me, so
there you go.
She's had her work cut out for her.
Plus, I hope you have a great day with that. But plus, also, got to give a shout out to my brother, as his birthday also is on Sunday, which lands on Mother's Day. So, Ted, I know you're not there. You're doing your thing right now. Happy birthday, brother. See you next week. Joe, we'll see you next week. We are Keys of the City. We are out.
Yeah. Keys to the city, baby. When you see us, so you know you really viewing greatness in the making. Double up on facts we stating. Podcasting, cruise control, city, state, the nation. So what you saying, what we saying, prime information. Facts, keys to the city, we unlocking the statements.
Streaming every Friday.